finished in the top 9 of the Pro Tour.
Right.
So pretty impressive result.
Small end, but really good average finish. It was between Patrick Chabe and the other person playing it. He'll be playing against Paul Waite, who's playing Naya aggro. It's the first Naya deck we've seen of the day. And we have Josh Ravitz starting the game on Isolated Chapel. Both players just exchanging tapped lands.
I think that's going to be a common theme of the standard format for many moons to come.
Yeah, certainly with the temples giving you that added bonus. A lot of players just using their turn ones to do that. We see a pair of double-colored 2-drops come down. It's Precinct Captain for Josh and a Colonial Tusker for Paul Waite. Paul Waite's list a little different than what you'd expect from a Naya deck. It truly is Naya aggro and not Naya midrange. You actually see that he has a Boros Charm in his hand.
Yeah, his deck is definitely doing a lot of attacking. He has also, interestingly, eschewed Experiment 1. He's running Elvish Mystic and then a lot of the Power 2 and 3 drops. I think that's probably a reaction to things like Sylvan Caryatid and Frostburn Weird catching on, which make the Experiment ones much worse than usual.
Well, Josh had a pretty strong play in that he had a Doomblade for that 2-drop and hit in with Precinct Captain to make a creature. The downside is that Josh did not have his 3rd land here, so
Paul Waite takes a shock for Sacred Foundry. That gives him access to white mana, relevantly. The only real instance he can play are Boon Satyr and Selesnya Charm, so I imagine he's planning to deploy one of those.
Yeah, so he played a Shockland untapped and then passed the turn. Really suspicious, but it's going to be Boon Satyr. Just as a 4-2, it's not going to be able to block Precinct Captain, but it can basically untap that soldier token.
Which is exactly what happens. Josh goes ahead and replaces it. Paul takes 1 less damage, but that Precinct Captain's getting rowdy, and a second one joins the board.
Second Precinct Captain for Josh. He did hit his 3rd land there. It was another Isolated another Godless Shrine.
Yeah.
Apologies, into play tapped.
Josh coming out strong with these Precinct Captains. One of the concerns a lot of people had with the black-white mid-range deck was, how aggressive could it really be when it's running effectively 12 tap lands, right? You've got your Soldier of the Pantheons and your Precinct Captains with 12 tap lands. But here, Josh is making a pretty strong case for exactly how aggressive you can get.
Yeah, well, it seems that, I'm not sure positively, he has to play everything on curve. He seems like he's able to navigate his tapped lands decently well. He didn't have to shock to play any of his plays so far this game.
Not a claim Paul Waite can make, and now he's going to attack with Boon Satyr. That's a pretty represented pump spell between Selesnya Charm and Gorkland Rampager. It's pretty difficult for Josh to ever block here.
Swings a 4-2 into the first striker. It looks like, and he's just going to go a huge amount of damage. Josh did not block. Paul taps out for Gorkland and Boros Charm to deal 16, dropping Paul down to 4 life.
Well, it's a good thing Josh hadn't taken any of those Shockland damages. If you see Paul's hand, he actually has a Boros Charm ready to go. So if Josh does not gain life somehow, or Sin Collector that
dodges the bullet.
That's exactly what Josh is going to do. He's going to use Sin Collector to protect himself from Boros Charm.
He'll take the Boros, and does not have to think, takes Boros Charm.
This also lets him know that Paul has that Selesnya Charm, which he can now block to beat. Previously, if he had just left 1 Precinct Captain back, he would actually just still be dead to Selesnya Charm if he didn't block with Captain and Sin Collector.
Right.
So now he knows, I need to leave back probably both of these Captains and just poke in with this 1/1.
Right, so he can't push too much damage right now, but there's also the danger that if he doesn't press damage, there's a Pelukranos waiting for him.
Yeah, definitely a bit of a problem. Josh, it looks like, has another Doomblade, so 2 Doomblades.
He has a pair of Doomblades.
So I guess he's not that concerned with the Pelukranos. Really, he needs to just avoid dying in the next 2 turns, and he can just Doomblade Paul's remaining creatures, which will effectively neutralize the threat of Selesnya Charm.
Right, so right now Paul's debating on whether or not how much he can swing, or Josh is debating how much he can swing with.
Yeah.
I think the answer is not much. We'll see if anything. Remember, if the Precinct Captains hit, Josh does get more creatures.
Yeah. He'll be forced to, however, wind up just trading them up with Boon Satyr, whereas I think he'd rather just keep the 2 Precinct Captains back. It seems like the safest play he can really make.
Yeah, he has to assume his opponent has a 6-power Trampler here, because he knows about a Selesnya Charm.
Well, he's going to go for it.
All right.
I can respect the clock.
Yeah, so both Precinct Captains, that'll drop Paul down to 8. Create 2 more tokens for Josh, so now he has a full 6 creatures on the board.
He does have 4 toughness here. So he can successfully block against Selesnya Charm. He'd be dead to a Boros Charm either way, right? So he's not that worried about that. What other cards are really threatening him here?
Well, Gorkland Rampager is a card that he has to, that's pretty relevant here.
It would lethal him if his opponent drew a Gorkland Rampager. He would also need to worry about, Land Stormbreath Dragon as running draws.
All right, so we see here Pelucranos, no attack from Paul Waite. Josh drew a land. If it's untapped, he can double Doomblade for the kill here.
Doesn't look like...
I believe that final card's a land. I think he hit an Orzhov Guildgate, however.
Yep. That does appear to be what the card is, and that will lock him out. He's probably going to wind up using Hero's Downfall this turn, conserve a little bit of his mana efficiency. Oh, no. Oh, he has Soldier of the Pantheon as his other, so that's how he's going to actually use that 3rd mana. And Soldier of the Pantheon, interestingly, protects Josh from Boros Charm, right?
Yeah, it does mean that it does protect him from Boros Charm.
In response to Boros Charm being cast, and that means Paul is down to even fewer outs to actually kill Josh.
And this is a great attack here by Josh. By swinging the entire team here, Paul actually does have to make the block on a 2-power creature to prevent himself from dying, which means that Josh gets to clear the board without using one of his kill spells.
Yeah.
Soldier of the Pantheons there as a follow-up, and Paul's down to 1. It's that Soldier protects him from the Boros Charm out.
I don't think there is a card he can draw here, and Paul draws 1 and packs it in.
Yeah, if he had a 5th land, Stormbreath Dragon would have been another out, but he didn't. So a close one there, but Josh does squeeze out the first win, moves up a game.
Yeah, well played game by Josh. Paul took a little bit of damage from his Shockland, and he got just beat up a little bit by those Precinct Captains. They got out of control. You don't have a lot of great answers to them anymore. It's tougher to get a Domri kill in this archetype, especially now that Paul is running a version without access to Boros Reckoner. In order to gain Boon Satyr and Colonian Tusker, he's had to run more Forest in his deck. That means he doesn't get to run the Minotaur Wizard.
Yeah. So looking at the sideboard of Paul's deck, he has access to a full 4 Gruul Charms in this matchup. Gruul Charms are a card we really haven't seen too much constructed play with. One of the questions would be, is this the kind of matchup he wants it for? Something where it's a big creature mirror, or is that? I'm wondering what the function of the card in the deck.
I don't know. Considering how few creatures the Black-White deck actually kind of runs that are relevant in that capacity. I mean, it does let you get through those Soldier of the Pantheons. And I guess he doesn't have very many effective ways to actually do that, considering a lot of his creatures are gold. His removal spell, Domri Raid, is also gold. I could kind of see him wanting access to Gruul Charm. His other options in that vein, he has access to Chandra Pyromaster, which is an excellent way to get rid of Soldier of the Pantheon. And he could go bigger with some Unflinching Courageous, planning to trample over. That's not the kind of plan I really want to go up against with Doomblades, though.
Yeah, Aura seem really poor against Doomblades. So one of the interesting things about Naya decks is if you ever look at all the creatures Naya decks have access to, you frankly just have more good cards than you can possibly fit in a deck. Paul, just kind of in his deck design, is actually playing his 4 Voice of Resurgences out of the sideboard in this matchup. Couldn't find room because there's so many things he wanted in the main deck, he couldn't find room for them in there.
I think the way Naya has transitioned into more of a fatty boom boom archetype these days, it makes the elemental token a little less potent. Like, you really want to lean on both sides of Voice being good, which is, where you want your Esper matchup to line up. Like, you make their Dissolves bad, you make their Doomblades less effective, that's Supreme Verdict's much worse. All around you're just getting a lot of value. Whereas, making elemental that's going to vary between like 1/1 to 3/3 probably in an average game, really not as impressive since the front side of Voice is not that relevant.
I think on top of that, the front side of Voice, you're saying control decks now have access to really clean answers to Voice of Resurgence. They have Glare of Heresy, they have Last Breath. Regardless, on Josh's side, this is a matchup that surely gets better from post-board. He has a full 4 Lifebane Zombies in his sideboard, which are, obviously excellent against any green creature deck. On top of that, he can just overload on removal. He can think cards like Thoughtseize and bring in cards like Devour Flesh, Doomblade, and Banisher Priest, which, against a basic aggro deck, really seemed strong in the matchup.
Yeah, anything that buys him time and lets him slam one of his big guys like Desecration Demon or Opposite that are going to be very difficult for Paul to actually answer. It seems like that's going to be a great card because Paul is really relying on a lot of early aggression and then his creatures just remaining durable and being able to pound through whatever resistance is left. When you got a bunch of Doomblades and then the 2-for-1 in Lifebane Zombie, that gets a lot harder.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't want to be casting Colonian Tuskers into Lifebane Zombies. That seems like just the actual worst place I could live. I remember casting Flinthoof Boars into Lifebane Zombies, and that didn't
was
feel
bad
great.
enough.
But at least I could peel those guys and haste them through in the later turns. Yeah, now it's just yuck.
Yeah, Colonian Tuskers is a card. I played it at the PT last weekend. You're right, though. It hasn't seen much play because I think we had Flinthoof Boar before that. Now that the rotations happened, obviously that's the card you have access to. Still pretty good. But,
it's a great rate. It actually speaks volumes to the power level of creatures in Standard that Colonian Tusker is not just a card you look at and go, yeah, that one's sweet. He does have like some pretty severe competition, obviously, the 2-mana slot.
Fleecemane Lion is probably better.
Yeah, which is going to be easier to cast in a lot of decks and certainly has a bigger upside.
Yeah, I really think it's interesting with how we've seen gold mana bases develop, like multicolor decks, where you see something like Fleecemane Lion and you say, oh, that card's easier to cast than Colonian Tusker. Normally you'd say, hey, the card with more mana, different colors, is the harder to cast card, which I think you're absolutely right when you said that Fleecemane Lion is actually the easier card to cast.
Yeah. Definitely a tricky spot to figure out which creatures you should actually be running in your Naya decks these days. You mentioned how many there are. I think that's actually just the key to building these mid-range decks, at least in the Naya variety, is identifying which ones are actually attacking the current metagame. Like week to week, you could be playing a pretty different suite of creatures, I think.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of cards that he's not playing. He does have, for example, he's down to just 2 Stormbreath Dragons in his current list. He doesn't have any Advent of the Worm.
Yeah. We already mentioned the Boros Reckoner transition away.
Yeah,
that's a deck-wide transition, but you could obviously, move the deck back in the other direction if you really wanted to.
All right, and so we are underway in Game 2. Just as we had in the last game, both players start off by trading tap lands. It's a Temple Garden for Paul and a Orzhov Guildgate for Josh. And Paul will start out turn 2 on that Fleecemane Lion, so another 3/3 for 2.
Kitty cat.
Yeah, he does have an Elvish Mystic, which looks like it's been kind of stranded in his hand. How do you feel about that card in these 3 color decks?
I think that you get a lot of bonus, especially when you're on the play, if you can actually deploy an Elvish Mystic. That said, if I wasn't running at something like Domri Raid, I wouldn't be that interested in it. Like in the green-white decks, I'm not that big on Elvish Mystics, to be honest.
You can just play 2-drops and 3-drops on curve. Yep. It's not jumping the gap, doesn't seem as important.
Yeah, I was looking at some of the testing that the guys were doing in Roanoke before the PT, and they had Elvish Mystic and green-white decks, and I was like, this just doesn't seem where I want to be. I'm already getting browned by the Supreme Verdict decks. Do I just want to get even worse?
So Paul plays a turn 3 Smiter. He has to shock for it. In return, Josh shocks for a Lifebane Zombie. He gets Boon Satyr out of Paul's hand, leaving him with just a pair of Mystics and an Unflinching Courage. I think you're kind of right here. The Mystics, Paul really just has one card in his hand at this point, and it's Unflinching Courage.
Yeah, which, as we already mentioned, it lines up pretty poorly against Doomblade.deck, which is what Josh is actually playing. He can't really afford to Unflinching Courage his only relevant creature. He's already in bad shape if that Loxodon Smiter gets obliterated by a Hero's Downfall or a Doomblade. He'll be even worse shape if it gets targeted by an Unflinching Courage.
Yeah, and Josh has just that for it. He does have a Hero's Downfall in hand. Paul drew Colonian Tusker for the turn, so he's able to put 4 more power on the board. So Josh is going to have to basically clean up the mess on this board, but after that is looking to be pretty good here.
Yeah, and we get to see Lifebane Zombie doing exactly the work we were describing during sideboarding, getting matched up against a Colonian Tusker after exiling a card. Just a straight up 2-for-1 for 3 mana.
Yeah, Josh has another Lifebane Zombie in hand. He has a Precinct Captain. He also has a Hero's Downfall. That's just how he wants to make sure that he can cast these spells when they're still irrelevant, but as fast as possible.
Yeah, he's obviously probably interested in trying to cast 2 spells this turn rather than being restricted to just playing 1. But at the same time, there's a fair amount of pressure out there. He might be tempted to do something else.
Well, he could play 2 Precinct Captains.
That's the debate. And the risk is, obviously, Paul could draw a card that dramatically changes combat. And if he alpha attacks, Josh won't really have a lot of safe lines. And Paul can actually make that play whether he draws a good card or not, even.
Yeah, and so he's going to go ahead and go for Lifebane Zombie. It's going to take that other Elvish Mystic, leaving Paul with just the Unflinching Courage.
Yep. I imagine one of the reasons Josh is content to settle for a Mystic there is, 1 less mana is actually going to matter if he's trying to avoid dying to Stormbreath Dragon or some other large creature. And he doesn't know the exact composition of Paul's deck either. He's probably just operating on some assumptions he has about Naya, Looks like Paul is Unflinching Encouraging something. I think he drew a second copy of the card, to be honest, and so he's going to go for it.
Put the first one, and I like that he puts it on Tusker to, kind of spread the love there, so it doesn't want to go all in on one creature.
Now, Lifebane Zombie plays reasonable D, but not fantastic D, considering his toughness. So against Trample here, he's not really going to work out.
He's going to have to get 2-for-1 here, which he's probably okay with since both Lifebane Zombies took a card.
Yeah, it's more of a... It's like a 4-for-2. Or,
Yeah.
As opposed to
Yeah, it's a 2 for 2. Yeah, it's
one,
still a 4 for 2.
But the damage is also worth something, so we got to hedge a little. It's like
Yes.
a 4 for 2.7 or something.
Paul,
or a 4.7 for 2.
Yeah, Josh is going to take 8 damage on this attack, so it's going to drop him to 6. He does know that Paul plays cards like Boros Charm, so he's got to be a little concerned here.
Josh draws a Soldier of the Pantheon. Actually, a pretty reasonable play. It'll force Paul to Unflinching Courage that locks on Smiter if he wants to continue getting in any damage with it.
Yep, and so we see cards committed here. Paul goes ahead and plays the Soldier of the Pantheon, plays Precinct Captain, leaves open 1 mana. He's pretty far behind right now on the board.
Yep. Paul debating what to do here. He drew a Selesnya Charm for turn, so he probably thinks there might actually be a potential I can squeeze in lethal here. If he slams both creatures, I'm not sure what he's going to roll with, though. He goes
Unflinching Courage, the Elvish Mystic. So that'll put Josh up to 7 on the trigger from Soldier of the Pantheon. But this attack is 4/7. Josh is going to be forced to block here.
Yeah, I imagine he's just going to double up on the Smiter and eat it, right?
He can double up on
like
something.
His immediate intent.
He can double up on either creature. I don't think it matters, whichever one he wants to kill. Probably the Smiter, because that's more damage.
Right, and he gets to hold on to his Soldier for an extra turn as well.
Yeah, Soldier
he gets to buy another toughness out of it. Certainly a reasonable arrangement.
Yeah, so Precinct Captain trades with Luxodon Smiter. Josh drops down to 4. Paul gains 3.
Draws a Doomblade. Goes ahead and Doomblades that guy, and now he can play a Precinct Captain as well. And suddenly, despite a large life total discrepancy, Josh is looking pretty good.
Yeah, Josh down to 4. So remember, Paul still has 1 card remaining.
And we have to also keep in mind that Soldier of the Pantheon is once again locking out Boros Charm as a top deck for the kill.
Yeah,
doing some
normally if he's
serious
at
work.
4, you'd say, hey, Boros Charm's really good here.
Paul is sitting on a Selesnya Charm, so Josh will want to be careful. He doesn't actually want to get nabbed by the Night token just coming in for lethal after coming in during the end step. He also has to kind of worry about his Soldier of the Pantheon getting killed by a Night token on when it attacks. Like if Paul were to draw a Boros Charm next turn, he might just try and Selesnya Charm, block Soldier, untap Boros Charm, you to death.
Yeah, so Josh committing to the board pretty quickly. He saw that Paul bottomed a card off a Temple of Abandon, so then he swung in for 4 with Soldier of the Pantheon and Precinct Captain. Made a token as a blocker and played Desecration Demon, which will get the last card in Paul's hand. He's going to use the Selesnya Charm as a removal spell.
Yep. All right. So Paul is once again drawing to Runner to do pretty much anything here. Killian Tusker, one of the better ones. It holds off every creature on Josh's board. It will force him to have a removal spell if he wants to keep getting in, but Doomblade.deck is happy to supply one.
Yeah. Tusker, remember, he can try to steal again with something like Tusker and Gore Clan Rampager. But as it is, Josh has had that hero's downfall since the beginning of the game, finally found the opportunity to use it, and now has pressed in for 4 more damage, dropping Paul to 16. Domri Rat is the draw off the top, but it's going to have to find more action.
It awkwardly does gain Josh 1 life, assuming he hits that trigger, and that'll outlaw his ability to go Stormbreath Dragon into land for the kill.
Yeah.
Looks like he whiffed anyway.
Domri did not hit, so Josh is going to send exactly 4 at Domri, 2 at Paul. Make sure that the 2 that are going at Paul are from Precinct Captain, so Josh continues to grow his army. And in hand, he plays a Lifebane Zombie and has kept a Doomblade in hand. It's pretty much, looks like he has the game on lockdown.
Yeah, it would take like Runner, Boros Charms, assuming Paul's not dead on board. Yeah, and that's not a Boros Charm.
15, so that's going to be 2 turns. First swing is for 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It's actually for 10. Makes a token, puts Paul down to 5.
Yeah, I think we missed the 2 on the previous turn from the Precinct Captain. So
okay, so it's down to 3.
He's at 3 life, and Josh has locked it up against the top of Paul's deck.
And that's going to do it. So Josh Ravitz defeats Paul Waite 2-0, moves to 7-1, and getting closer to the top 8 of our open here.
Yep. I don't think the Unflinching Courage has really worked out for Paul there. Obviously, he did get in a lot of damage, but when his creatures died, he just was left behind again. The game's ended the exact same way. Paul went from a pretty heavy advantage in the actual racing situation to just losing while Josh stayed at exactly the right life total both times.
Yeah, well, it doesn't. So Unflinching Courage tends to be good in matchups where you need to have, well, 1, when life gain's great, and 2, when you need to have the biggest creature around. So a green mirror, they're pretty good because you can just have the largest creature. This isn't really either of those matchups, and especially as you said, because Josh has so much so much spot removal. The Unflinching Courage really invites you to get 2 for 1, and I don't think the payoff of having a bigger trampling guy or the lifelink is particularly worth it. As we saw there, Paul created a life advantage of 23 to 4, and when Josh stabilized, those numbers just didn't matter.
Yeah. All they meant were slight additional draw steps for Paul. That's really the only relevance that they had.
Yeah.
And considering he
not
needed runner
many of
to
them.
get anywhere, yeah, like it was one extra draw step basically. I think I could maybe get behind bringing in like one Unflinching Courage, because it's a pretty awkward card to have to play around, and it can certainly swing a race in like a volatile fashion. But you know, it's going to be a chancy card, and it's the sort of thing I would mostly be like, I've got this one creature in play, and I'm trying to race down like a demon or something like that. All